Hello everyone, it's Brian and welcome back. In June of this year, I did a video called 5 Records by Toronto Artists, and it was my intention to do subsequent videos on the same theme, but for some reason I didn't do it. So it's been more than 4.5 months, and I thought, why not do part 2 and see where it goes. There may be more parts, but here we go. Now I'm going to start with a guy I mentioned in the first video. If you remember, you probably don't, but the last record I showed in video number 1 was from a band called the Dream Warriors, and they had a record called And Now the Legacy Begins. For the video of the track, my definition of a boombastic jazz style, there was a cameo by Maestro Fresh Wes, and I mentioned that last time. So this is the record that came out a year before the Dream Warriors record, called Symphony in Effect by Maestro Fresh Wes, which cost me $8.97, marked down from $8.99 for some bizarre reason. This is 1989, his first record. Now, Maestro Fresh Wes, born as Wesley Williams, sometimes known simply as Maestro, was a rapper. He's also now, I think you would say, an actor, a producer, an author, and he actually hosted a TV show called Race Against the Tide, which is a reality show filmed in Eastern Canada where people would build elaborate structures of sand before the tide came in, and he hosted that show. I don't know if it's still going on. This record went double platinum in Canada. It had 2 well-known singles on it. So you would call, I think without any controversy at all, say that Maestro Fresh Wes was the godfather, or is the godfather of Canadian hip-hop. This record went double platinum, as I mentioned. The first Canadian rapper to gain any mainstream success. He made the top 40 Billboard charts as well as the rap charts in the United States. First certified platinum record by a black Canadian artist. Let Your Backbone Slide was the first hit in Canadian hip-hop history. He won the category of best rap record at the Juno Awards. That's the equivalent of the Grammy Awards, which was the first year that category was ever used. He won that. So I would say, without any question, the most influential Canadian hip-hop artist in history. And this record sold lots, but probably mostly on CD, because it was 89. That was, I guess, around the switchover years. So I think this is probably hard to find, but a very influential Canadian record. The other single was Drop the Needle. I have 12-inch singles for both of these. Let Your Backbone Slide contains samples from the Funky Drummer, the James Brown track, and there's also, it uses a sample from a song called The Champ by a band called the Mohawks. So yeah, there's a couple tracks I don't really like. There's one where he tries to channel that really smooth LL Cool J thing, which I think kind of fails. But other than that, I think influential record. And oddly, I know it because the radio station I was listening to at the time was what we called alternative way back then. College radio, played a lot of R.E.M., The Cure, that kind of thing. But they tweaked their format around this time and started playing things like this, as well as Eric B. and Rakim, Dream Warriors, LL Cool J, and that kind of thing. So that's how I knew about it. I probably wouldn't have listened to it otherwise, but it's kind of to the credit of the radio station that they expanded to include this kind of stuff, and I really like it. So influential and kind of interesting. That's number 1. The second one I want to talk about is from a band called Do Make Say Think, and the story according to Wikipedia is that they were rehearsing in a school somewhere, and the words Do Make Say Think were written on various walls, and they just adopted it for their name. This is post-rock music. Now, when you hear post-rock, I don't know if that means anything to you, but I think of Godspeed You Black Emperor. That's probably the most well-known Canadian post-rock band. This record's called And Yet. It's their 3rd record from 2002. So post-rock would, I guess, it's hard to describe it, but I would say music that doesn't adhere to the usual verse, chorus, verse format, no solos really. Sort of, in Godspeed's case, it brings in some orchestral elements, but it's experimental with maybe jazz and krautrock influences, electronica and that sort of thing. They used to also practice in the basement of the University of Toronto radio station that was called CIUT. For me, really good driving music. I have the CD too, and I would take it whenever I went on for a long car trip. Other post-rock bands you might know, I think Tortoise would qualify, maybe Explosions in the Sky, Mogwai. There's the insert. I would say that I didn't love the review that it got on AllMusic. They gave it 2.5 stars out of 5, which I thought was absolutely ridiculous. This is a much better record than that, so I don't know what they were thinking of when they gave it that that rating. Third record from a band I think everyone knows. That's Rush. And this is from 1974, but this is the 40th anniversary box, if you will, from 2014. And the artwork brings back the original artwork from the Moon pressing, which is extremely rare. It's really hard to find that record. The repress on Attic Records is not so difficult to find, but the original Moon one, which you can see, if I can get it lined up, the Moon label is really difficult to find. I think they were dismissed as being like a baby Led Zeppelin originally until WMMS, I think, in Cleveland started playing them, and they got a lot of traction there, and of course would go to Cleveland to play concerts, and that sort of became their pathway to fame. So there are 3,500 copies of this inside of the box. But I'm upset that they put this in such a deep box. I mean, how much shelf space do you need? It's twice as thick as it needs to be. So limited edition from the 1974 record. This is the record. Again, so it just follows the Moon pressing exactly. You'll know if you're a Rush fan, you'll know this is John Rutsey, not Neil Peart. Neil Peart joined after this record because John couldn't tour owing to his diabetes, apparently. And what else is in this box is, well, we have photos of the band, John, Geddy, Alex. We have a poster. We have what's called the Rush family tree, which is kind of interesting because it covers 1965 to 1974. So everything in red is someone who was associated with Rush. So back way at the top here with John Rutsey's first band called The Guild. He was in a band called Summerwind. He was in a band called Lost Cause with Alex, and Alex's original name, Not Lifeson, is there. And then through the different iterations of Rush, etc., all the way down to the Rush we know with Neil here. Also has this tape and some information about the record here. So I guess this is as good as it gets if you can't get I don't know. I'm sure an early Anthem record pressing would be fine, but this is kind of cool. Bizarrely, they were dumping these, I think, back in the day. When this came out in 2014, after a while, you could find these all over the city for almost no money. I think I paid under $20 for it. I would walk into a record store and there'd be like a stack of 10 of them on the counter, heavily marked down. But now the prices have jumped a bit, so it's good to have that. I just wish the box was thinner. Right, so let's go to number 4, from a band founded by a guy called Greg Godovitz, called Godo. His name is spelled G-O-D-O, Godovitz, and that was the original name of the band, but they added the extra D. If indeed it is lonely at the top, who cares? It's lonely at the bottom too. This is their second record from 1978. They were formed in 1975 in Scarborough, which is formerly a borough on the east of the city, but it's now politically part of Toronto. They're a hard rock band with a bit of blues in them. I would say that the Cock On is an interesting track. There's a track called Oh Carol, Kiss My Whip, and that's a direct reference to a person called Carol Pope. If you're a Canadian music aficionado, you will know a band called Rough Trade. And the lyric is, I just like to say to Carol Pope of Rough Trade, kiss my whip. So that refrain, Oh Carol, Kiss My Whip, occurs many times in this record. That track, sorry. Back in the day, I may have mentioned this before, there was a radio station called Chum FM and a TV station called City TV, and they would host what they called simulcasts. So they would suggest that you turn your TV to channel 57, tune your stereo to 104.5 Chum FM, and place your speakers on either side of your TV, turn down the volume of the TV and crank up your stereo and get a concert experience. So I remember seeing this band do that one night. I saw Max Webster as well. And because I mentioned this, I have to mention Rough Trade. Carol Pope and Rough Trade had a simulcast too, and that's Carol Pope on the cover of Rough Trade's Avoid Freud. This is her writing partner, Kevin Staples, on the back. This band I really love for lots of reasons, but they were known for their provocative lyrics and crazy stage antics. Like, she would do all sorts of crotch grabbing long before Michael Jackson ever thought of it. She performed in what could only be described as bondage attire, leather bondage attire. And there's a track on here called High School Confidential, which is notable for being probably the first explicitly lesbian-themed top 40 hits in the world. I remember my dad overhearing the lyrics on that and was a little concerned, but I kind of liked it. So there's Carol and Kevin. She's still active in the music industry. She did a special during the pandemic, which I saw part of, or she did a concert or something during that part. But other tracks on here which are fantastic are, well, It's a Jungle. What's the Furor About the Furor, Fashion Victim, Grade B Movie, Lie Back, Let Me Do Everything. Really interesting record. This is the second one. They have several others, and they're all really entertaining. Very kind of pushing the boundaries in all sorts of ways, especially if you ever saw her live. Really fascinating individual, and Canadian from Toronto. So that was 4.5 months late, but hopefully you won't have to wait 4.5 more months for part 3. Thanks for watching.